It's the third and final day of MOAB 2009, and after facing three free causing armies consecutively on day two, they've decided to give me a break and pitch me up against Orcs and Goblins. Now, I've got to admit that I've rarely played against Orcs and Goblins in the tournament scene, and if I can remember correctly, I've only played them once, and that was back in 2007. The Hand of Nagash tournament was run by Matt, and it was held at Unlimited Hobbies at Blacktown. It was only a small tournament where 14 people turned up, and I played against Orcs and Goblins, and was fortunate enough to get get a win. Looking at his army, he had 2 units of 30 Night Goblins, a unit of 20 Night Goblins with bows, two smaller units of 20 Night Goblins, 4 units of 2 Snotling bases, 2 units of 8 Squeak Hoppers, the big unit of Trolls at the center of the picture there, 7 in the unit, and he's converted Ogres to present the Trolls, looking very nice, and 6 Fanatics. Now, in terms of heroes, can't quite remember what he had exactly, but I know he had an Orc Big Boss on board as his general, Goblin Big Boss with a BSB riding a Spider, and 2 level 2 Shamans who both picked up the Foot of Gork spell. So after thinking about who would go first, my opponent finally decides to take it and immediately sends the Squeak Hoppers and the Troll units forward. Now, with the lack of movement from the Night Goblin units, it was quite clear that his intention was just to hang back, wait for me to come forward, and then use the Squeak Hoppers to flank me, and also use the Trolls as a Fnatic slingshot. Now, Trolls are the perfect slingshot because of their regeneration, so my opponent knew very well what he was doing. Being on the other side against Orcs and Goblins this time, I get to see how dangerous Squeak Hoppers really are. It's easy for a shitty army to combat Hoppers, but I've got no Goblins with short bows, so I thought, well, I'll have to deal with them another way. I did intend to use a Doom Diver against them, but during my first turn it misfired and couldn't shoot that turn nor the next. He was rolling really well during the magic phase, trying to cast Foot of Gork twice. Once on the Wyvern, which I had to get rid of. The second attempt was on the Doom Diver, but I failed to dispel it. But luckily for me, it failed to wound anything. A brain cramp on my part. Decided not to stick the Night Goblin Shaman behind the hill, nor stick him in a unit. So he decided to go after it with the Doom Diver, while he targeted the Giant with the Rock Lobber. I must say, he was guessing pretty accurately, and that was making me a little nervous. The guess on the Shaman was spot on, but it did scatter backwards, and it narrowly missed him with the D3-inch deviation. As for the Rock Lobber, well, he was just short, scored a partial but failed to win the Giant. During my first couple of turns, just moving up the big blocks towards the Troll unit, knew I had to get rid of it as he'd invested quite a few points on that unit. Moved my Wolf Riders up with the intention of charging the Speed Chuckers, but he was on fire with the Doom Diver. He guessed accurately once again, and then he rolled a 6 to see how many hits, so the Wolf Rider unit was wiped out. Finally knocked some sense into myself and moved the Shaman in with the Speed Chucker unit. He was rolling pretty high with his casting rolls while he targeted the Wyvern with the Foot of Gork with both Shamans. Had no choice but to use one of the scrolls very early in the game. He's decided not to advance any further with his Trolls, which surprised me just a little bit. He also didn't advance with his Night Goblin units, and that meant that if any of his Night Goblin units decided to flee, then they would more than likely be off the table, as he was so close to the edge of his table. The Speed Chuckers weren't really that effective this game, had very little to target at besides the Trolls. I tried shooting all the Chuckers into the Doom Diver at one point with a faint hope of knocking off the crew, but kept rolling 2s and 3s, so that wasn't getting me anywhere. Having enough Foot of Gork sent my way, I decided that it was time to get into combat and chop things up. First thing I charged was the Night Goblins, the BSB and his Orc Boy unit, and the Black Orc War Boss into the Trolls. Funny enough, the Night Goblin unit passed their fear test, but the BSB and his unit failed. And that sucked big time because that meant he was going to slingshot even more Fanatics into my Wyvern instead of the Orc Boys. So he's worked out the damage, and the poor Wyvern copped 2 wounds for his troubles. The Nets managed to entangle him, which helped quite a lot, but the War Boss couldn't get the necessary kills, although he did kill one Troll. He's targeted the Night Goblins to kill as much things as possible. I won the combat, but not by much, and the Trolls stayed in combat. On the far left-hand flank, my other unit of wolf riders took care of the snotling unit holding that table quarter. The picture was too blurry, so I had to leave it out. But I also had the intention of charging the speed chucker with the wolf boys. Only took up another 5 hits from his doom diver, and that wiped him out. With the giant, had to bring him out to get into the thick of things and cop 3 wounds for his troubles from the chuckers. Round 2 versus the trolls, and the nets do their jobs again by entangling him. He kept regenerating the wounds from the war boss, so that wasn't helping. The war boss only managed 2 wounds, so that left all 4 trolls fighting back. And he's wounded the wyvern twice, so it left the big bird with only 1 wound left. Still won combat this time, and I managed to break them, ran them down with the pursuit, and overran into another big block of night goblins along with 3 characters. So he's used them as the fanatic slingshot this time, and finally knocked off the wyvern and left the wound on the war boss. In case you're wondering what happened to the BSB's units, they got flank charged by his squig hoppers. He managed to kill quite a few orcs, but are still on combat, and he rolled high enough for them to break from combat. Pursued them, but couldn't run them down. But in the following turn, I just charged the hoppers again to make them flee off the table. In this picture, you can see me moving all my flankers up. I've charged the goblin big boss on wolf out of his unit and into one of the speed chuckers. Notice that you don't see the Savage Orc Boar Boys. That's because of the last 2 turns they've squabbled and pretty much did nothing for the entire game. Combat with the War Boss and my Night Goblins against his Night Goblin unit with characters. I've challenged with my War Boss only for his Night Goblin champion to accept. Pumped it with 8 attacks at strength 9. His Orc Big Boss managed to fluff it and killed only the 1 Goblin, while his other attacks did nothing. So the 6 overkill points from the challenge along with the standard and rank gave me 8 points of combat res, while he had the 1 kill, 3 rank, standard and outnumber gave him 6. So I won the combat, and he rolled for break test and he rolled a 9. I said okay, he's got the BSB nearby. Re-rolls, rolls an 11. So managed to break them, and he ran through the archers and off the table. Panic test all over the place, and to my surprise, he passed them. And yeah, panic test all over the place there, and yeah, he only failed once. And that was the unit of 20 Night Goblins, and they fled off the table. My Night Goblins overran into his Snotlings, while the War Boss overran into a solid block of Night Goblins with his BSB. I think I should have just stayed with the War Boss and not overran, but oh well. Issued a challenge with my War Boss, which he accepted with his Night Goblin boss. All his characters were gone, so I only had the 1 extra strength and attack. Still managed to kill the boss, but lost combat, but rolled low enough to stay in the fight. He's managed to kill the giant with the speed chucker before knocked it off with the goblin big boss, and did another 3 wounds on the giant, killing him. And I'm telling you, this guy was on fire with his shooting. Although the rock lobber did misfire once and killed one of its crew, so couldn't shoot it in the next turn as well. Charged his other unit of hoppers, which failed their animosity at a critical point of the game. Charged it with the squig herd and orc war unit. Broke the hoppers and overran into the snotlings, which the night goblin unit couldn't break. Now on my last turn, he had the intention of moving the BSB out of his unit and within that 12-inch break test bubble of the war boss, because I knew he was going to lose combat. But then I rolled a 1 for animosity and did 5 strength 5 hits on the unit. Panicked the unit and fled on my last turn, so just one of those things. Hopefully something they address in 8th edition of the Orcs and Goblins Codex, because Orcs shouldn't panic from the kills of animosity. I just think it's lame. Anyway, in close combat, issued another challenge with the war boss, declined with his BSB, killed a couple of night goblins, but it wasn't enough. He had the 3 ranks standard numbers, couldn't get his BSB because of the decline challenge. I did the 2 kills, so I needed 6 or less, rolled high. If only I had the BSB nearby for the rerolls, that would have helped. So he was gone, and he got full points for it. Anyway, in the end, I did win this game 12-8. It was looking like a bigger win, but because of the BSB panicking his unit and the war boss running off, my opponent got some points back. And of course, the Savage Orc Boar Boys who did sweet FA this game. Finally got them to move in the last turn, but only towards my side of the table to get some points for table quarters. It was a very entertaining game of Warhammer, and definitely one of the more challenging games I've played.